Tough. Welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
We got this thing that we do before the big interview. We're trying it out for 2026 called the hot question.
Okay.
You ready?
Hit me.
All right. What is the Vatican still hiding that could change the story of Jesus? And how do we know it's not just internet lore?
That is an interesting question. You know what? There are these kind of catch-alls that I find people like the boogeyman. Like if you have a conspiracy theorist, dump it on the Vatican, dump it on Constantine, dump it on the Council of Nicaea, because they're easy and as far as anybody's aware, they're unfalsifiable, right? Like what are you going to do? You're going to scour the halls of the Vatican? Now, interestingly enough, the archives of the Vatican do open up every once in a while.
Do they really?
I know at least two people who have been in the private library in the Vatican because they have documents. Up until recently, there's a very important manuscript called Codex Vaticanus, named after the Vatican. And it's one of these, they call them the Great Codices. There are a few copies of what we would consider a Bible, like Genesis to Revelation all in one volume, from the time period when those would first have been started to being made. Because prior to that, they were just individual books floating around. So you would have had a copy of the Gospel of John or a copy of the Psalms or a copy. The Torah was typically put all in one, like the first 5 books. But it's exorbitantly expensive to put that many books all in one volume. And so after Constantine decriminalizes Christianity in 312 at the Peace of the Church, at the Edict of Milan, you have this opportunity. Christians are coming out of the woodwork. They're allowed to be part of society. And as almost a peace offering to some of the really advanced level persecution that was experienced in the emperors prior, under guys like the Emperor Diocletian, who had these mandates of like total empire-wide persecution. So persecution against Christians was pocketed. It wasn't like all empire-wide all the time. But under guys like Diocletian, it was pretty bad. And so Constantine sees this, and as a peace offering, some of these ancient writings describe him commissioning these Bibles being put together. And the early Christians would have seen these largely as kind of like mini libraries. So they include books we consider scripture, but they also include other books that nobody considers scripture. But they're all in one volume. And so that's the first time. So Codex Vaticanus is one of these. And up until not that long ago, some academics would have had some like the ability to look at them, but largely you were dealing with like photocopies and prints. And a decade or so ago, they digitized the whole thing. And I know at least 2 people who have been able to go and see the real McCoy. So every once in a while they do open up, but in terms of like the real secrets buried in the basement of the Vatican, I mean, your guess is as good as mine.
Do you think they're in there?
I mean, I'm sure there's something in there. I don't know. We always want there to be a story that's more sensational, don't we?
Very true.
Yeah. I think most of the time these entities are probably more inept than they are malevolent. And so not to discount that there are, things happening going on behind the scenes, but is that true in the Vatican? It could be.
Why would the Vatican, why would they archive this stuff into some secret chamber? I mean, do you think that's what Christ would want or what God would want?
Yeah, I mean,
to hide all the evidence,
sure,
and make it harder to achieve faith? Because that's essentially what it does. Am I wrong? Or maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, if the Vatican has artifacts that help to prove the existence of Jesus Christ, then that proof would also help people come to faith a lot easier. And I don't think God would have left it behind to not strengthen faith.
Yeah, I think
we have the Vatican hiding it.
Everything in those types of categories are probably publicly available.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not a Roman Catholic, right? So I have no qualms with defending or not defending the Vatican. And I actually, we were filming in Italy the last spring, and we did a tour of the Vatican. And I know there is something about, there's an awe and a transcendence to the amount of stuff that they have gathered from the ancient world. I think there's also something to say about opulence and maybe even gaudiness. That's part of the conversation. Do I think that that's what Christ would want? I mean, I'm not necessarily here to say that, but I'm not a Roman Catholic, right? So as a product of the historical Protestant Reformation, I do think that there are excesses that have gone on within the Roman Catholic Church that needed correction and still do.
Yeah. There's a follow on here too. If we strip the conspiracy away, what's the most realistic thing the Vatican could be sitting on? Letters, records, a manuscript category that would actually move the needle. Who actually gets access to these archives?
Yeah. I mean, there are all sorts of things that are possible and probable. Like, I don't doubt that there are some artifacts that the Vatican maybe hasn't made public in terms of historical documentation. I can't say one way or the other because I don't have any evidence for it. It would be complete speculation. But there are so many things that are publicly available, especially in terms of the evidence pointing for something like the historicity of Jesus or the historical case for the Bible. One more thing added to that, I don't think there is anything that would necessarily make or break a case at this point. In my personal perspective, the case for something like the historical reliability of the Bible and the historical case for the contents of what it's communicating is so solid that anything that's added to that is just bolstering the case. And so we have so much publicly available evidence for these things that has been known for the last almost 2,000 years. So if the Vatican does have something that kind of adds to that, I think it would largely be icing on the cake.
Gotcha. I actually have another question. This is totally unrelated. And since this isn't going to be in the interview, I'm just going to ask it now. But, something that I've been working on since, actually I worked on it quite a bit last year, is idolizing shit, materialistic things, human beings, whatever it may be. And so it actually, I started working on this because I had a car. Same car we rode in this morning. Was really proud of it. Now I'm actually embarrassed of it. But a hailstorm hit and I threw a shit fit in front of my 3-year-old son. It destroyed the car. And then I was like, this is ridiculous. I just lost my shit because of a fucking car in front of my 3-year-old son. I look like a complete idiot. That will never happen again. And from that point forward, I just made the decision to no. That was idolizing something that is a fucking vehicle. Right. I'm never going to do that again. And so I just really did some self reflection, and I thought about things and realized there's a lot of materialistic things that I'm idolizing, and this is embarrassing and not who I am. And so I got rid of a lot of those things, or I am getting rid of a lot of those things because they're not important. Car is going to be one of them. But anyway, so what am I getting at? I'm getting at, we're talking about the Catholic Church and keeping relics from the ancient world, hidden from humanity. Even if they do open it up, it's hidden. They're idolizing those. Am I wrong? Should we be, even if it is from Christ or God or a relic from that time, should we be idolizing those? Would Jesus have idolized that?
I think we actually have test case of this in Scripture. In not necessarily the New Testament, but in the Old Testament, you have instances where the Israelites are getting sick, they're being bitten by snakes, and God tells Moses to basically to make this bronze serpent on a pole. And you put the bronze serpent up, and everybody who looks on the serpent is healed from the snake bites. And realistically, what I think this is it's pointing to Christ, right? The thing that's raised up, and that looking upon this thing is what heals you. But at a certain point in time, people start to idolize the serpent, and they gotta get rid of it. Same thing with the ephods, the dress that the priests wear, where there were stones on them, and that this was one of the ways that God communicated with the priests in the temple. And we have instances within the Old Testament where the Israelites start to worship the ephods, and they have to get rid of the ephods. I think our hearts, it's not a matter of whether we're worshiping, it's what we're worshiping. Our hearts are inclined to worship something. I think it was G.K. Chesterton who said, even the man walking into the brothel is searching for God. And we're always, because we're created in the image of God, and we're created for community, and we're created for relationship, we're always going to be looking for something to fulfill our identity in that. And sometimes that's things. Sometimes it's people. Sometimes it's acts. It's we put our identity in a thing that is going to, in the moment, make us feel fulfilled, or in what the world tells us is going to give us that agency and that thing that's going to really put our value. But ultimately, those are all going to fall short. Whether it's a car, or whether it's a pilgrimage to go see a relic, or whether it's my education or my family, and I think what we see in Scripture is that it's not that any of these things are wrong, right? The solution to idolatry is not to become a hermit and sign off all physical items. I think it's to calibrate and understand that these things are temporary. And these things can be gifts. And some of these things can be opportunities for worship. Pouring into fixing your car or making it look good, or that can be an act of worship. Whatever your hands do, do it with all their might, right? It says in Scripture. But it's that calibration of, when does this start to become the thing that...
An obsession.
What I'm putting my identity in, how I'm finding validation. Now, the only thing that's actually going to satisfy that is living up to the standard by living up to what we are created in God's image. And in that way, there have been some theologians who have written on something like the Ten Commandments. And the Ten Commandments being a law, but really being a promise in that they're reflections of God's character. God is not a murderer. Shawn, you're created in his image. Don't murder. Live up to that standard by which you were actually created to be. God is not a liar. Shawn, you're created in his image. Don't lie. God is not an adulterer. Wes, you're created in his image. Don't commit adultery. These things are sacred. These things are good. You can actually find your identity by living out who you were created to be, by obeying that. And in that sense, some theologians have pointed out that the commandments become promises. You won't murder. You won't steal. You won't commit adultery. But it's the framework of understanding that it's because you're created in the image of God. And so doing those things is actually an affront. It's cosmic rebellion against who you were actually created to be. And your life is sacred, so don't kill. Other people's life is sacred, don't kill. the things you own are sacred. Don't steal them from other people. Your body is sacred. Sexuality is created for something beautiful within the union of a covenant. Don't bastardize that. And so when we're talking about idolatry, it's less about actually, bowing down to a little statue or something like that. It could be. But I think far more often it's this act of putting something in the place of God where we find our identity, when we're really created to solely find our identity in our Maker.
I think if you realize that that item is running you and you're not running it, then
Yeah, totally.
that's where you know it's gotcha.
Yeah.
If it's running your life and you're not running it, then things needs to change. That's as simple as I could put it for myself. But yeah. Do you still struggle with that?
Oh, every day. Every day. I mean, I think it's this side of eternity, I constantly need to remind my own heart who actually owns it, right? Where the goodness in my life actually comes from. Because we're so fickle as human beings. Even, you experience something that's such a blessing and such a goodness, and it's so easy to let, Paul says, the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life, consume you, right? Even when we remind ourselves of how good things are. Let me use a practical example. When I was 11, I was a paraplegic. And I had experienced what it was like to not be able to walk. I had a condition that cut off the communication between my brain and my legs and left me paralyzed from the waist down. How long did it take for me to basically completely forget that? To wake up in the morning and not go, man, it's amazing that I can walk out of this room. It's a pretty short period of time.
Was it?
Yeah, well, because life keeps on going. And it's so easy. And it's so easy to make it about us. So even in the midst of that, there was a period of my life where I was very involved in athletics. I ran track and field in my undergrad for university. And I'd convinced myself that God had allowed me to experience the paralysis and what I truly believe is a miraculous healing, because he was going to make me the next Olympic athlete who is going to do things for God. I don't know if you know the story of Eric Little, very famous track athlete in the 20th century, who ran in the Olympics. And his whole thing was, God made me for a purpose, but he also made me fast. And when I run, I feel his pleasure. Right? Chariots of Fire is about him, the famous movie. And I was convinced that was going to be me, but I was making it all about me, right? I'd taken this thing that God, I think, genuinely had allowed me to experience, and I'd redirected it, not to be honoring to God, but actually to be honoring to me, and was humbled by injuries or teammates who were just far more athletically gifted than I was, or all sorts of things. And so I think our attention can so easily be redirected by the world and by the busyness and by our selfishness that we forget. We cross the Red Sea and we've seen God do this amazing thing. And then the Israelites, what do? They build a golden calf to worship. And you think, are you guys idiots? Mm-hmm. But if I look at my own life, I do that all the time. Mm-hmm. I see God do miracles. And then the next day I'm stressed about this thing or that thing.
That's actually how I'm getting ready to kick the interview off. So this will be good. Well, thank you. No matter where you're watching the Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this at all, anything, please like, comment, and subscribe. And most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, head to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and leave us a review.